Welcome to DAO Deep Dives, where we interview DAO founders, core DAO contributors, and everyone else who works on the periphery of decentralized autonomous organizations.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of DAO Deep Dives, talking a little bit about what you guys are doing and what's going on at Bankless DAO. Welcome, everyone.
I am above average Joe, and I have been at Bankless since day one, and I've been following the newsletter since its first issue. It's been really fun to watch that evolution happen over time. But real quick backstory, Above Average Joe used to be the name of the handyman company I had before I went full-time Web3, and I just kept the moniker coming in. So that's a little elevator of my background, and since I've joined Bankless DAO, I've basically been full-time there. It is home, and I love it.
Bankless DAO since day one too. I can say that I thought at first that Above Average Joe was about, I don't know, the godfather of Bankless DAO. He was, well, he was really everywhere. Now I work for Polygon, but I'm very fond of Bankless DAO, very attached. I'm still editing the newsletter, the NFT newsletter that is called Decentralized Arts.
Yeah, Tony, in a similar situation as Grendel, working for Polygon Labs in the DAO team now, able to spend less time in Bankless DAO than we would probably ideally like to these days, but trying to keep up and trying to follow the happenings in the DAO, even if it's wide sprawling at these points. Happy to be here.
I'm also a contributor from day one and in the legal guild. So at the beginning, I accessed the DAO and there was this section of the server, legal guild. Didn't know what a guild was, but I accessed and I found a lot of people that then became like dear friends. And we worked on legal matters from the very beginning. We did a lot of projects together. We have created a newsletter. And then lots of people that were part of this initial guild went to work for important projects. I work as an independent advisor for many different projects. I've also founded a group of lawyers, which is called the Blockchain Lawyers Group, which encompasses today more than 100 lawyers all over the world. We have a lot of general counsels of several projects. And yes, now it's 2 years, and I was thinking that everything began in this guild with 3-4 people that now are very known in the industry. And I followed what happens at the legal guild, not daily but weekly. And the persons that today are the coordinators are people also that are in touch with me all the time, and so I'm always happy to see what happens in the DAO, which is really a kind of gym where you learn to be part of a DAO.
Cool. Nice to meet you guys. So, Above Average Joe, let's talk about, I guess, just how you found your way to getting into the space in general. Like, why are DAOs even interesting? It sounds like you were working in a completely different industry. So, that is like quite the hop, right?
Oh, yeah. I came from a very much blue-collar background. Heard about Bitcoin back in 2013 and was started paying attention basically right away. But then I put my money in Mt. Gox 2 days before that hack. And so we all know how that went. I wound up going out of the orbit of the industry until 2017. And then I went, I think I still have something in that mining pool from that USB stick I bought off of the internet. And I went back to look at the balance. And by the time I got the blockchain back in sync, it had already passed the all-time high. But I went, maybe there's something to this super cycle thing. And so I started to get out of this island of nobody else inside of the crypto industry anywhere around me. I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. I ended up finding a podcast that David Hoffman was doing with CK Snarks a while back, and they were debating back and forth. And Hoffman's arguments were strong enough that I started to actually investigate what was with this Ethereum thing. The idea that there was more utility than just a UTXO was a really tantalizing opportunity. And I began to really follow what was happening on Twitter at that stage. And I came across Ryan Sean Adams, and the two of those guys were some of the just most clear and articulate voices in the space that I had found thus far. And so I latched on to basically anything they did. And as the newsletter evolved, they brought David on with Ryan and then added the YouTube show and all that good stuff. And I cut my teeth in my spare time moderating that Discord server because I was like, I don't know how to get into this industry, but I want to be one of the first people you guys hire because you're going to be big. And so I just did whatever I could to assist them, answer questions from local people in the server, and make their job of moderating their community easier. And the day that they surprised everyone with the airdrop and said, Bankless DAO is a thing, here you go, do with it what you will, guys. It was a very natural thing for me to jump up and say, I would like admin power so that I can facilitate the evolution of this, because there's no way you guys have time for it. You're building podcasts, you're doing newsletters, you ain't got time to go mess with Discord servers all day. And so I jumped in and began doing whatever it was that the DAO needed and trying to anticipate and front run the next scaling limits. And it has been an evolution since then.
Tommy, let's go with you. Thinking about just DAOs, we ask all of our guests, like, what is a DAO?
We're very much working towards the consensus that all organizations can be some form of DAOs or decentralized companies. And we're very interested in seeing more and more focus going toward protocols, or how do you make your business a protocol to use this kind of incentive whirlwind that is Web3 or crypto at the moment. And for us, it's the base layer that you need to have something on chain to make it code. You need to have some sort of decentralizing thing on the governance layer. But apart from that, I think almost anything can be a DAO at some level.
Before we go into too much detail, give our listeners just an introduction to what is Bankless, where did you come from, and what happened in the last 2 years. And maybe, if that's not too much yet, why is that important?
I think that the real attempt of Bankless DAO was to create a social DAO which had the purpose to be educational, like bringing education with respect to topics related to the blockchain, not only related to DeFi, but also more in general to everything which has to do with blockchain. Very inclusive with every part of the world. So we have to remember that there were different sections for every country of the world. Everyone was free to create it. And therefore, it was a messy Discord. I think that Bankless was the most successful example of social DAO, like a DAO which engages people just because they wanted to get together and do stuff. And this was the first important aspect. The second one was that it created from the very beginning an output in terms of writings, in terms of podcasts, in terms of information, which was never seen before. And it was created out of nowhere. It was just the launch of the token with the airdrop. And this created a lot of enthusiasm around the DAO. And basically a big machine that started to work in different directions. And the best thing that it created were like articles, publications that also nowadays can be used by every person interested in blockchain. Then obviously, if you start something like this, it's a kind of big experiment. Something goes super well, other things went not so well, but it was always like a way of understanding things and of being together. And like, it's beautiful to see that the very, very initial people, original contributors are still there, because it's something which changed their life and that they bring together also today. This is very beautiful.
That's cool. Give me one more, and maybe we go to Grendel. Why would someone join Bankless DAO today, 2 years in? If someone is just hearing the first time maybe about Bankless DAO today, what would someone motivate to join Bankless DAO?
There are so many people that every single day speculates why Bankless DAO is big, what Bankless DAO did. I think that Bankless DAO, as Eagle said, is about personal growth and education. Joining Bankless DAO gave the chance to so many of us, to find their own path in this space, in the Web3 space. Many of us are now 24/7 Web3, meaning that we could change job, change life, what we like, what we want to do. Joining Bankless DAO means joining a very big community made of so many people that can actually mentor you or advise you on how you can grow, on how you can actually do it in this space, because you want it so much. You understand that there is something different than outside. So for me, joining Bankless DAO today as 1 year ago and 2 years ago, even if you didn't know that, It was about becoming more aware of what is happening. That's what the Bankless original mission was, but also growing a lot, growing as a community, growing as friends many times. And this is, of course, great. But also, and it is very important, finding a new way to grow also on a job with a different way to do and help the others. So if people loves to they can be part of something, and not just because at the end everyone thinks that Bankless is a brand. Of course it's a brand, but it's not just a brand. The DAO is not a brand. The DAO is a community. So making a brand a very big community is not something that happens every day, and it can be done just if everyone that they are part of this community really believes on the values, on the ethics, on everything that is done. Of course, not everything will go as it should be, and there will be issues, there will be problems as always. But if I have to, I don't know, check if the pros are more than the cons, I would say definitely that the pros are so many that everyone should really join Bankless DAO.
Joe, can I call you Joe?
Yeah, by all means.
Awesome. So I would imagine that you agree with that last statement. So could you just maybe dive into a little bit of the mission of Bankless DAO and what is the actual differentiator here between Bankless and maybe some other kind of competitor DAOs or just DAOs in general?
So the mission statement at the point when the token was launched was help 1 billion people to go bankless. And that's a pretty nebulous mission statement. It's almost closer to a vision. But the idea is that we as bankless people recognize that the financial infrastructures of the future are going to be things that aren't subject to problems like seniorage. We're looking for credibly neutral playing grounds where the access to financial services are democratized. And by bringing awareness and education around platforms that enable that and that seamlessly integrate with the tech stacks that are unified under mostly the Ethereum case, but generally blockchain technology in general, the evolutions that we find ourselves going through as a society are transformative. It's a digital industrial revolution. And that means that not only are we having to rethink what work looks like in this new economic landscape, we also have to consider what it means for interpersonal relationships. Because if companies themselves, in their current form, cease to exist in the evolution of our new infrastructure stack, then how we relate to one another in a world of work is an entirely new playing field. And so we're coming together agreeing that this idealistic view of the future is something we want to work towards. And we're going to take steps towards that from whatever angle we locally have our skills. We're going to share what we know, and then we're going to chase our passions, and we're going to plug those outputs into the social goods of the community. And because we have a coordination mechanism like a DAO's governance token, we all have something that we can use as a social store of value that also represents our contributions to that social structure. So we've got a little bit of an internal nation state that's developing. And then at the same time, we have this broader mission of making the world an equitable place to participate. And anything that helps empower and move that mission forward is something that we as an organization will support. And so it's surfacing those things, educating people in the elements that are associated with identifying what those are and how to use those pieces of infrastructure effectively. And then we propagate and add that social value back into the ecosystem, because at the end of the day, we're playing an infinite coordination game. And that means applying things like permaculture principles help guide our approaches to what we do day by day and develop a sustainable and even regenerative path forward for whatever our future looks like after this revolution is fully instantiated.
So, with all of these principles in mind, if whoever wants to pick this one, what are some of the most exciting initiatives you guys have going on at Bankless? Because I think there's quite a few at this point. So pick your favorites.
Okay, I can cover it. I was the coordinator of the Translator Guild for a long time. And inside the Translator Guild, we wanted to find a way to give the chance to everyone that was coming from countries they were not speaking English as a native language. We wanted to give the chance to them to do something in the DAO, because most of the time, many of them were not able to interact with others. But in the Translator Guild, everyone was feeling that was as the others, because everyone was talking a different language. And so we organized them to translate the newsletter and so on. And it was a very good job that was done there. And at the end, there was also the decision from another program from inside Bankless DAO, that was the Media Node program. We started the International Media Node program. With the International Media Node program that is still alive, each one of the language became a sort of a guild of its own. And with their own publication, they were getting the rewards, the incentive from by the DAO to build something. Some of them become external DAOs. So they were still inside Bankless DAO, but it was, I don't know, Bankless DAO Brazil. I think at the end it was the most successful. The other one that I'm still taking care of with Koros and Nonsense and Frank and others is Decentralized Arts. Decentralized Arts, I guess that we already passed at least 1.5 years of life with this, and it is the NFT newsletter. We cover everything about the NFT world. We try to showcase new artists. We have news sections and so on. And this is something that we are very proud that at the end we skipped just one time, because it was kind of Christmas the same day, and so we skipped it. But beside it, we are always there and publishing. But also, I could pass to Eagle. He was editing the Decentralized Law newsletter for long.
Yes, it was a good newsletter, but we gave up. So it's not there anymore, because being constant in this things is really hard. It's also something which we all learned, because obviously if things go well, the market was super powerful and the token was flying and everyone felt engaged, and so also engaging people was very easy. Finding good people that were writing the articles was quite easy. Then obviously things changed over time and it was difficult to engage persons, but what we did remained, and these issues are very interesting because it's a kind of history of the blockchain. In certain periods, the legal problems arise all the time, and so depending on the period, you have the different legal problems, the creation of DAO laws, you have the fall of FTX, and so sometimes when I want to be a bit emotional, I open these issues and look at it, and it's a bit reliving these moments of uncertainty from a legal point of view, which I mean was great, and also the people that wrote there were very good. To me, I want to talk about another things which remained that we did with the Legal Guild, which was creating an ombuds within the Bankless DAO. It had a kind of commission that could step in cases in which there were disputes within the DAO, because Bankless DAO was enormous, and having so many people meant also to have occasions in which some disputes could arise or people felt not really happy about something. And so we had this commission set in place, which was voted by the community, that was there in order to listen to the problem, try to find a solution in a very smooth way. And I think that we were the first in doing this at Bankless DAO. It was a kind of internal, not really an arbitration system, but something that went in this direction. And I saw that it exists also now. 2 years it resisted. And if there is a problem, we have this kind of body that gives indications. Sometimes it was hard for them to take responsibility. But nonetheless, to me, it was a very good idea. And I know that it's also a system that was replicated in other DAOs. So I remember I wrote the first post together with 2 colleagues, and then I'm happy to see that it remained into the DAO.
Neat. So maybe we'll stay on track, but go the exact opposite direction. Tommy, what's one of the messiest situation you've seen so far at Bankless? And hopefully one you have collectively overcome and learned from.
I think in my recent memory, we had an issue with a guild. I don't think we might not need names of the guilds, but there was a leader that kind of skipped the election parts of a DAO, and especially the re-election parts. So there was a quite important guild where we had to figure out or refigure out how to come in and bring that governance back into that guild, because for the foreseeable history there was only one person ruling with an iron fist, and of course role holders were happy enough to do the work and get the compensation, but there is also this important part of the DAO that is people are supposed to have a voice, and that situation got a bit heated, especially in the Discord arguments behind PFPs and non-voice chats. It's easy to get stuff excited and maybe express yourself in a less pleasant way than you would in these kind of settings. So it all worked out. I think we even used Eagle's famous ombudsman to help sort some of the situations, but definitely when guilds or sub-DAOs go away from the decided norms and rules, it can get messy to bring it back, because in general people prefer to maintain power over re-election.
Yeah, the coordination piece, Joe talked a little bit about this, is of course almost what it's all about. In that regard, have you guys ever toyed with, or how public is everything? Meaning, specific example, you mentioned on a call like this, maybe you're trying to show yourself from a better side, right? Especially if you're on video, if you're dox yourself, versus if it's just on a chat behind your avatar. And I've been in DAOs where we just tossed around the ideas that like just hard rule, everything needs to be public, every call needs to be public. You can still decide if you're joining as your real life self or whatever. Have you guys played with that before? Does that help, in your opinion?
Our default state is transparency. Any of the curative measures that I've put into Discord as a steward of that, and thankfully I am no longer the main steward of that. I really appreciate those guys that are taking care of that stuff these days. But the development of anything curative there was because we had channel overload. So, with 250 to 500 channels at any given time, it's just too much for any one person to stay on top of. I tried and I lost track of that like on month 3. And yeah, the development though, we also have a fire hose tag. So if you want an uncurated view, you can absolutely have it. It's there for the taking, and we don't gate the ability to go look, because we are building in the open. It's an equitable system, and the way that we share ideas inside of our local culture is one that encourages that kind of communication rather than hoarding it and keeping it behind proprietary walls. And so we do try to maintain that transparency from the outside in. But there are cases where we have been known to put up a little bit of a privacy wall, and that's usually if there's personally identifiable information or something otherwise that could be considered sensitive or damaging if publicly shown, and keep that to a silo with trusted parties as much as is possible, or rather those who are actively facilitating the duty that requires access to the information. So OPSEC is a very big part of what we actively maintain in terms of our transparency level. And we have an entire InfoSec project that is dedicated to maintaining that across protocols and platforms, and making sure that we have knowledge of who's got access keys and that there's proper redundancies. And so that tends to be the guiding principle behind anything that is turned a bit more opaque. But if it can be transparent, we prefer it that way. It's more inviting to add new members in, and there's so much there that if we're not totally transparent, it's really hard to get where you want to be inside of an organization like this. When it was the initial 40 or 50 guys that were actively contributing and 100 on the sidelines watching, it was pretty easy to bounce back and forth. But now we're in the realm of like thousands of people that are contributing in their local projects and sectors, but you can't really see it because everybody's in their own little project area that keeps them in their own little silo. But we make sure that if you want in, you can get there.
Awesome. I think these next couple are going to be for Eagle, but that's just an assumption. So feel free to pass it on to whoever's best for this. Sven and I are both like investment DAO nerds. We end up talking a lot about that on this podcast. Does Bankless have exposure there? Can you tell us a bit about Fight Club? Did you have any involvement with that?
I had an involvement at the very beginning. So this was perhaps the first legal struggle that we had in the Bankless DAO, because Bankless, as said before, had the aim of being a social DAO, which created an output which was just educational. And so from a legal point of view, it was a very simple DAO, or not a dangerous DAO that creates legal risk. There was this very passionate team of Fight Club, which wanted to do investments, wanted to create a vehicle for investments. And this created a lot of headache at the beginning, because it was very early. It was 2021, without syndicate, without established tools. There was Meta Cartel, but it was an already well set DAO. And so like finding a good structure was not really that easy. And our DAO is really international. So there were people like all over the world that were saying, but why are we, I don't know, creating so many problems? It's not difficult to create a DAO that does investments. Why don't we simply create a multisig and everyone can put the money inside of it? And then there was the American guy that was saying, but no, look, it's a security. We cannot collect money in this way. And so you really felt how different the perception of legal risk was within the DAO. And that's why like this Fight Club started to be an investment vehicle, but then it was many different things over time. It was an educational tool to educate people about investments and how to set up an investment DAO. And they sold NFTs. And so I think that in the end, they were more aligned to the mission of the Bankless DAO. And what I can tell is that they never gave up. Like people as Tessa, I remember her like passionate, trying to find the legal way to do the things. And from the very beginning, it was clear that it was challenging and a bit different than the rest of the DAO, which was just creating written output mostly. But like the Fight Club was something that basically could give to the DAO a different direction. And it was also the beginning of and here perhaps I give the word to Grendel, the beginning of the talks about sub-DAOs. I think that in Bankless, we had the first discussions about creating sub-DAOs, and the idea that you can create like sub-organizations which deal with peculiar occupation, which could be also doing investments. But in separating these parts of the organization, you're also avoiding a bit the risk for the bigger organization and creating like sub-vehicles. And Fight Club was one of the first examples of sub-DAO, I think, of the world, because it started really with the idea not to create legal danger for the main DAO, for the big DAO that was a collection of thousands of people spread all over the world.
Yeah, it was very early, of course. We were trying to find a solution to a problem that was under everyone's eyes. The idea was not just that a new community, part of another community, would need a place where to stay, but also the fact is that some of those sub-DAOs that were taken in consideration were coming from the international media notes that I was talking about. And so some of them were thinking, some of those people were thinking to start a sub-DAO for a purpose. The purpose was to make the DAO even more accessible. Back then, the value of the token was quite high. And from many countries, it was difficult to be able to spend so much money and have the token to become member of the DAO. So the idea was for them to lower the threshold of access to the sub-DAOs, but in order to lower it, it was necessary to have another token. So the idea of trying to have a second token that was in some way related to the original one without having a DEX inside Bankless DAO was at the end very difficult. And at the end, those sub-DAOs really grow as separate DAO. But the feelings of everyone that was on those new DAOs for Bankless DAO were so high that at the end it was just like having other guilds. Some of them had their own token. It was a new token. It was not related.
So what is the current structure of the DAO, of Bankless DAO? Is it structured differently now with the sub DAOs and all that? What did you actually end up settling on, I guess, is the question.
So sub DAOs are voluntary forms of a spinoff, and as such, we encourage them to stay interacting close with the main brand and associating value capture mechanisms to the treasury where possible, because that creates the global alignment that keeps us all together and moving in the same direction. But largely, they have their own autonomy. For the most part, our structure as Bankless DAO is more focalized on the difference between guilds and departments. And the distinction between those is guilds tend to be more of an external service offering, so they focus on like education in the individual level, or in getting people jobs inside of the industry and sectors where those skills are valuable, or it is in the department side, which is more internally focused. That's like operations or tokenomics, where we're focusing on refining what's already inside of Bankless DAO. So we have the distinction between working in and working on the organization, and that is the largest differentiator. And then the grants committee acts as a form of incubator for projects that go through the governance processes to spin up and begin their journey to either becoming a department or a guild of some form or another. And oftentimes that leads to their own local development of goods or services. And then we just work to get them in unison with the Bankless branding and the social directionality that we have coalesced around as part of our mission, vision, and values statement.
Let's do a bit of a lightning round. So we'll start with Tommy. Let's talk about the future. We like to put our like futurist caps on and think like 10x, 100x from here, DAOs evolving, right? What's it like in 20 years? Where are we really going from here?
For DAOs specifically, I think you don't really think of DAOs as the terminology DAO. I think that's more of a internet native organization, because that will bring the masses to understand more clearly. And I think that the businesses we now see as software as a service, those are basically DAOs, and there's going to be no reason for them not to be DAOs. And the Web3 wheels are going to be well hidden for the general public. I think the models and the incentives that we have started to experiment in with Web3 will end up being a superpower, and code will eat the world even more because of it. So I think definitely there's a large part of the world's population working in DAOs, even if they're not aware that it was originally a DAO. And I think that's where we're heading with the entire Web3 space. It's going to be very native to very many things, but people might not need to know about the wallet to be able to use it.
Grendel, would you agree with that? Or do you have any other things to add there that maybe are surprising?
Well, I would add just that I wish that in 10 years, everyone will have our own sovereign identity that could be also covered by anonymity if we wanted. And we could be able also to have our perfect reputation on chain that will be hidden behind ZK or whatever cryptographic thing we will have in the future. So a world where every one of us can actually prove without revealing anything about ourselves that we can, that we are, and so on, being able to interact with each other without being discriminated for anything, and a world that, if it will be more decentralized than today, fairer, and build on more as an open source structure, I think it will be better than today. I don't know if it will happen, but I think that everyone in this call is actually working for it.
So the bags of flesh that we currently occupy as like layer one, then we have these various identities that are like, some are ZK, some are open and public, but just different layers upon what we actually are. I love that. What about Eagle? Do you have anything to add? I think I'm going to guess, or I'm going to hope yours is like we get this legal thing figured out, because it's been a nightmare for so many DAOs and other organizations in Web3.
I think that because the law is normally very slow in adapting to social changes, but with DAO, actually, we don't have perfect legal tools. Legal wrappers is the name that is used in order to explain like a legal structure that wraps the DAO and gives to the DAO a legal connotation and an identification also in the external world. There was a lot of debate starting from 2021, and I have to say that a lot of new stuff came out, like this U.S. states with Wyoming, Utah, and then also the model of the Marshall Islands, like LLCs, which are a bit modified. These are interesting tooling, which in a certain sense encompass also some connotations of Web3. The fact that the membership is connected to the token holdings is something which is very new. You can create an LLC without a managing board, which is also interesting because it gives the idea of decentralization. And then you have also like some entities which can represent the DAO in the external world. Like in the US, you have the co-op, which was used by big DAOs, as for instance, Colorblind. Offshore foundations are also used a lot because they are ownerless, and so it's just an arm of the DAO. I have to say that the law works in a way which is centralized, and the idea that there is a management board that decides for the business, whereas decentralization is something which requires the intervention of every single member of the organization. And this is something which is really alien to corporate law, to traditional corporate law. My feeling is that now the direction is that DAOs and corporations are going to meet themselves in between. So perhaps the idea that everything has to go to the governance is something which makes the DAO really not manageable. And sometimes the initial idea of decentralization was too extreme. There must be some kind of role into the organization. And corporate law works in this way. And there is a reason why it works in this way. Nonetheless, DAOs have really something which is really innovative, which is connected also to the fact that they give real ownership to the members. It's not as in a corporation where you can have your shares, but in the end, it's just once a year you take a decision, which is never influential. With the token holdings, you have really the feeling that you are shaping the future of your organization, that you're part of it, and that you take really part to the decision making. And this is something that could become mainstream, like the participation into the organization is really one of the added value of Web3. And so if this narrative will become mainstream, I'm definitely sure that the DAO will have a place there.
So along those lines, I wanted to get your opinion there. From what exciting other projects you are seeing out there. You might be familiar with our friends at MyDAO, Marshall Islands entities. We see very interesting developments in digital economic zones. Catawba comes to mind there. And just that move towards more favorable jurisdictions as a potentially shorter term solution. I think I personally share your assessment that it'd be great if we didn't have to think in borders and just build a future where that doesn't matter. But for now it does seem to matter, and the law moves that way in accordance with kind of the rules and way of thinking we had. Just curious what exciting parts you've seen or which ones you are most closely following.
If we have to frame the perfect legislation for DAOs, it would be a kind of international convention with an organization which is outside of the boundaries of a state. So this is how basically everyone dreams to have a DAO legislation. It's a bit utopistic today. Then in the future, we have to see, because nothing can be excluded if we are going to be like more digital in the future. So there could be some sort of organizational or structure which is recognized like in the entire world, but that's very difficult. I see that these experiments are very interesting. I was skeptical at the beginning because I was like a decentralization maxi, and the mere fact of having a company to me was the death of the idea of DAO, because if you have on-chain, an off-chain representation, you're basically losing your decentralized nature because you have a point of failure, a point which is centralized. But I changed a bit my mind because like you have a lot of practical challenges that you need to face. And as a legal practitioner, what I care the most is the fact that members are safe. Like they need to be safe. Liability should be clearly outlined. Contributors need to be paid in a way which is quite normal. And so the fact of having a wrapper is actually very good. My feeling is that we have these two sorts of entities. You have the foundation for instance, the Cayman Foundation, which is an entity which was not born to be like a DAO entity. It's something which existed before and was readapted. It works well because it's a non-for-profit, and you can connect the foundation to the governance of the DAO. This Cayman legislation gives this flexibility of putting into the articles of association the possibility of the token holders to vote through governance and to guide the directors of the foundation, and also to control them, to change them. And so this works quite well. But obviously, you are in an offshore jurisdiction, which is not well seen in many Western legal systems. It might create some headaches from a taxation point of view. So you must be 100% sure if the person is involved into the organization that the person does not have troubles in its own jurisdiction. But it's an interesting way of addressing the issue and also like shaping an entity for a purpose that was not really the intention of the legislator. Whereas Marshall Islands, it's a nice experiment of jurisdiction that wanted to do this. Like they wanted to show to the world that they had a solution, and they modified the LLC law, which is very similar to the Delaware law. So it's nothing that it's very common for, especially for US people. But they have some particular elements that modified the LLC, which gives you the possibility of having this kind of algorithmic management, it is called, which is just basically relying on the vote of the governance for the decision of the organizations. And also the fact that you can create a contract with all the token holders together, which establish this DAO. You can identify which are the assets that belong to the DAO. And this is also a protection for the members of the DAO, because there is a separation between the assets of the members and the assets of the DAO. And now I'm delving a bit more into the Marshall Islands LLC, and I find it very interesting, to be honest, even if I was skeptical. So it depends a lot on the client, on the DAO, what the DAO wants to do. And also there, like I try to outline, I'm Italian, I would bring everyone to Italy, but it's not possible. We don't have the right vehicle. And so I outline a bit which are the mainstream vehicles that are used to wrap a DAO. And I see that people have then different ideas. There are people that like a lot the LLC, others that like to be in Panama and Cayman. So it's a wide array of possibilities. And what is beautiful is that in the end of the game, you have also people that like to remain completely decentralized and not go for a wrapper. And there you can also like add some legal tooling that protects the persons, for instance, the multi-sig signers. You perhaps put more weight on a governance which must be essential and all encoded, a bit in the direction of what Aragon is doing in trying to really demonstrate that everything is on chain and that there isn't an intervention of humans in the governance. And so it's really a way of experimenting new stuff. But you have always to be careful who are the involved persons. And unfortunately today, if there are Americans in the DAO or that have core roles in the DAO, you have to be particularly focused on trying to avoid problems for these people.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree with you, and it seems to be the sentiment recently, especially, right? If anyone is following what's going on. So I love the very thoughtful answers from the three of you here. I want to turn it around and go a bit more lighthearted with the next one. And Joe, I'll throw this one at you. What's the craziest idea you've had over your course in the DAO ecosystem or your exposure to DAOs? Like, what do you think should be a DAO that isn't yet? And if you had time, you would totally do it. Can be as silly as you want.
Oh man, one of my big babies that I've tried to work on since the beginning of the DAO is re-engineering compensation for a native asset-based economy. And I feel like I've got some pretty good progress there, but at the same time, anytime I show off what I've developed to anybody else, their eyes cross and they go, "What did you say?" So maybe I got some work to do. But I believe that solving for compensation in a native asset based ecosystem is one of the biggest barriers to DAOs successfully bootstrapping, because otherwise they end up having to give away the keys to the castle for a capital raise or something like that. And trying to find a way to get that flywheel going before you have the product ready, which is something that Bankless DAO had. We got the coordination mechanism. Now let's figure out what to do with it. Has created this sustainability first mindset in terms of developing the world of compensation. And I believe that we are due for some major innovations in that sector. And there's a lot of opportunity for those who are minded to look at developing that right now.
That is obviously much needed. I'm still waiting for someone to answer that question with car washes need to be DAOs. And the cars are the nodes that connect the different and just go off and hear something wild. So let's just talk about how people can get involved with Bankless DAO and how do they touch base with, I guess, you specifically, Joe, and then we can close out by having everybody let our listeners know how to get in touch with them for further questions.
We have a website that is, I believe, bankless.community, but we mainly operate through our Discord server, and you can find us on Twitter pretty easily. And if you get to Discord, you've made it to the main home base. And my DMs are always open, so if you ever want to get in touch with me, it may take a while before I respond, but I try to get to everybody.
Easiest way to get in touch with me is probably just to DM me on Twitter. Discord DMs is a bit of a hassle, so I definitely prefer people pinging me on Twitter, and then we can take it to Discord. Way too many NFT servers for Discord DMs to be a good idea. So yeah, ping me on Twitter. I'll be happy to interact with anyone.
Of course, Twitter, as always. Twitter is the best way at the end. I restarted being really degen on Twitter last day, so it's easy to connect to me there.
Yeah, me too. Twitter is really the best way also because you share your emotions and sometimes your crazy stuff. And it's where you find people randomly that write to you and you try to understand, is this real? Is it a scam? Or that's so beautiful. And so, yes, I like to understand if the person is real.
Yeah, we need those on-chain identities, right? We need verifiable on-chain identities. So when someone introduces themselves on a platform like that, it's, oh yeah, here's my 0x or here's my ENS. And you can immediately verifiable get the number one hits on this individual that's contacting you, and then even have them like sign something right then and there. So you know exactly who you're talking to.
Yeah, closing words here. I very much appreciate all you guys having 4 OGs of Bankless DAO on a call all at once is very amazing. So if you guys want to share any parting words with our listeners, feel free to do so. Otherwise, thanks for being here, and we'll catch you next time.
I will say that we at Bankless DAO are headed west, and it's not a journey that's for everybody, but we're glad for those of you that are with us.
Beautiful. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Bye. Thank you very much.
And that's a wrap. Sven and Solver, your hosts for DAO Deep Dives, a podcast about all things DAO. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time.